Storytellers don't just talk about the world, they shape it. The stories we share are like soil. They're living, dynamic, and the kinds of stories we choose to tell determines the kind of world that grows around us. Welcome, creative change makers. I am taking everything I've learned from communication, from psychology, ecology, art, activism, all the things to help people who want to try and use storytelling to make a positive impact in the world. Today, we're taking on a pretty big question. How do I make the stories I tell relatable? And I think the bigger question behind that one is, how do I make people care? So apathy is a pretty uphill battle, right? And it's often not just apathy, but it's distance that gets in the way. If you're trying to leverage creativity to create a positive impact, it often looks like trying to get people to care about the plight of a marginalized population. You're often trying to get people in more comfortable and privileged positions to try and care, and then you discover, hey, this doesn't seem to happen that naturally, that easily. Kind of by definition, marginalized people are often overlooked, ignored by media, by society, and a lot of this is by design. There are all kinds of barriers that keep them from even being in the same physical space as those who can influence decisions. We very recently had a high-profile case of a capsized boat that killed hundreds of migrants just not get the attention that it deserved relative to other things going on. I think we often hear the idea that people from different parts of the world who have different beliefs, different experiences, different socioeconomic statuses are going to be unrelatable, that we're just not going to understand and connect with their stories because they're so different than our own. I'm not saying that this is outright false, but when we subscribe to this the way we do, we often create our own barriers as storytellers. So about a month ago, I gave a TED Talk, and the whole premise was basically, yes, storytelling can be a catalyst for action, especially climate action. And somebody came up to me after the talk saying, I really appreciated that, but listen, we're currently in a theater in a pretty pricey part of town. The tickets to this event were a bit costly, but the folks here are of a very different lifestyle than the people you tell stories of. How do you get them to care? How do you get them to pay attention to the stories of people who have lives that look nothing like theirs? This is a really good question. They can feel like totally different worlds. Here's where I've kind of landed on this. One of the most powerful things about storytelling is its ability to get us to care and empathize with people who've had very different experiences. I think Toni Morrison's novels are a brilliant example of this. On a very different wavelength, so is Pixar. There's that whole running gag of, hey, the bugs have feelings, and now the cars have feelings, and now the feelings have feelings, and I haven't seen Elemental yet, but I'm pretty sure that I will walk out of that theater being like, I feel really seen by fire and droplets of water. I think this is a testament to how powerful storytelling can be, and I don't think we as storytellers should become our own naysayer. Yes, sometimes it is hard to get people to see and imagine things beyond their immediate surroundings, but this is exactly the special power of stories. I think the fact that a really good pitcher is on the mound should not be a reason to stop you from playing your best hitter. In fact, that should be reason to put the bat in his hands as much as you can. Now, I don't want to say that it's completely untrue that we have a harder time relating to stories that are further away from our own experiences. Like, as an Asian American who's finally starting to see representation more broadly in especially film and TV, it does make a big difference if you have people to connect with who have had similar experiences to your own. But I think at the same time, you should not underestimate people's ability to connect with characters who come from very different worlds. Like, I grew up without a lot of representation, but I am enthralled by storytelling because so many of the characters I saw and things I watched growing up were just so relatable. They captured my imagination. I'm trying to think of more recent characters that I've found really relatable. I think Maya from the super underrated series Maya and the Three. There's certain elements of Ted Lasso's character and Joe Gardner from Soul. On the surface, these are characters who I don't have very much in common with, right? Ted and Joe are a little older than me. Ted is super Midwestern, and Maya, her story might have taken place like 1,000 years ago, for all I know. But the things I relate to go so much deeper than that. I get how Maya feels of being this super ambitious person with high expectations and hopes for herself who feels like she never gets the opportunity to go on her own big adventure. I relate to Joe's discovery that your passion and your purpose don't have to be the same thing. I feel like that's something that's really sunk in with me in recent years, how you can have an activity that you really enjoy, that you develop a skill in, but it doesn't have to be your everything. Life is beautiful because of these really small, ordinary moments. I get Ted's response to adversity always being like relentless positivity, but then realizing that there are limitations to that, and you gotta learn how to make room for the other experiences of life. These experiences, these discoveries, these lessons, they go beyond age or location or career. These are emotionally rich, somewhat universal human experiences. And that's how you make a story or a character relatable. I recently watched the series Extrapolations. It was kind of like the Black Mirror of climate change. It focused on these loosely related storylines and followed them 60 years into the future as climate change took its toll. It had these themes of faith and work and family, and I thought, even if the series is not a home run, this is at least the kind of ambitious project that I want studios to be saying yes to, so I am for sure watching. Anyway, the first few episodes were like, okay. They were kind of bleak and perhaps a little too politically focused for what I was hoping for, but I found myself getting more invested in some of the later episodes that felt more character-driven, kind of a little bit more like Black Mirror in some ways. A character faces a difficult decision brought about by some big change or disruptive technology in the world. Around the time Extrapolations made its debut, the showrunner of the series was being interviewed on a bunch of podcasts, especially a lot that I listened to. And so I got to hear her talk about the creation of the show a number of times. She mentioned struggling creatively with the idea that the people who are most affected by climate change typically live in lower income settings, but if people are going to be watching her series on Apple TV, it's more likely that the characters they could relate to, the lifestyle they could relate to, would probably be one of more privilege and resources and decision making. So then a lot of the scenes and settings and Extrapolations are in the Western world. You even have one character who's kind of like a sketch of a Mark Zuckerberg type tech leader. And this was an intentional decision when she felt that she needed to take. I just kind of wish she took a different route. See, in my opinion, the part where things started to click was the 5th episode. It was set in Mumbai and it featured these 2 drivers who had to complete this job in this future world. India had gone completely nocturnal because of the heat and out of necessity. And anyway, they had such different ways of seeing the world, and this created this tension in their relationship that felt really honest, and I kind of wish this show would have gone there more often. Kind of made me wish she gave us a little more credit with our capacity to empathize with people living in very different circumstances from us. I think sometimes we're probably our own biggest doubters when it comes to our ability to make people care about others who live in very different settings. I think that if you're a storyteller who wants to use stories to make an impact, this should be a part of your work you cheer for the hardest. We have a really cool opportunity to help people discover that they actually do care. To feel a sense of connection to people across borders and other differences, you don't need to understand all the fine details to connect with an experience. The first time I heard this one song by Ben Howard, I forget where we were, and it's got lyrics like, hey, I wasn't listening, I was watching Syria blinded by the sunshine strip, you were in the kitchen, your mariner's mouth, the wounded with the wounder's whip, that's how summer passed away, the great dividing range, the green, green grass, and it's like, wow, I have no idea what he's talking about here. The way he sings it, the way he plays, the way it sounds, the feeling, it was like, I know exactly that feeling. I don't understand the concept of the lyrics. I get the feeling so deeply. It's like hope mixed strangely with resignation and melancholy. Stop worrying so much if the technical details or the demographics in your stories are perfectly relatable, and instead focus on these 3 things: emotions, relationships, and difficult decisions. These are the actual things that make a story relatable. I think often about Everything Everywhere All at Once. I think often about it for a variety of reasons, but one of the reasons that's relevant to what we're talking about right now is I don't think many people have experienced jumping across different parallel universes. Correct me if I'm wrong. If you have, let me know in the comments. But I do think people know what it's like to have a life where you frequently wonder what could have been. if you made a different decision years ago. I think a lot of people can relate to a fractured mother-daughter experience where you're just not understanding each other. Emotions, relationships, and difficult decisions. These are the near universal things that can anchor a story. So if you're telling a story about a climate-impacted community and you're wondering if this scene set in a village is just going to be too unrelatable, check for these things. Is there a strong emotional anchor that's present that will help somebody feel seen in their own experience? Is there a relationship between characters that feels familiar to a lot of people, that people have experienced before? Does somebody just have to make a really tough decision? And as a bonus, as a creator, if you could find some of your own decisions, emotions, and relationships reflected in the scene, that's often a brilliant starting point for being able to tell a story with heart. You just might even get people to feel for a trash compactor that has feelings. Thanks for hanging. Don't forget to tell me in the comments if you've ever hopped universes. I'd love to hear that story. Until next time, take care.